Good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Saturday, the 28th day of June, 2025. Now, the headlines this morning are going to make it very clear that while there is so much fake news out there, at the end of the day, we must wait and see what takes place next after Israel's victory against Iran. Let's look at the top stories. First of all, the Prime Minister's office denies U.S.-Israel talks on a two-state solution have taken place. This is from the Jewish News Syndicate. It's based on a story from the Israeli website Hayom, which we talked about yesterday. We're going to deal with this in a few minutes and share why it's very important that we get the story from the horse's mouth from Netanyahu and the prime minister's office before people start running with various stories. Anyway, we've got that one to start with. Then Israel Katz, the defense minister, he directs the IDF to develop a plan to stymie the Iranian recovery. It's in the Jewish News Syndicate. And the reason so is what we see with our next story, with chants of death to America, death to Israel. Iran holds a state funeral for leaders slain in the war. Some of the Times of Israel. And it's the same old with Iran. They haven't learned anything from this. They're still belligerent. They're still claiming they'll refuse to work with the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Association, and they're going to continue enriching uranium. They'll even redouble their efforts. And what a joke this is, because everything has been destroyed. But anyway, that's the third story. But then Donald Trump, the court again said he weighed lifting sanctions on Iran, but blocked Israel, and he also blocked Israelis' final knockout of the regime. It's also from the Jewish News Syndicate. But now, because of the response from the Ayatollah and the people in Iran, the sanctions are not going to be lifted. So basically, at the end of the day, we've got that. Make it clear, nothing's really changed with Iran, despite the devastating defeat. Same old, same old. Now, the first story here took a while to hit the news. So let me explain what's going on here. Yesterday, we had this story from Israel Hayom. That's the website, which is a conservative website in Israel, usually very good. The sources are good, and they're supportive of the Netanyahu government. And we had this story about how there was this euphoric meeting between Netanyahu, Ron Dermer, Marco Rubio, and the president on the phone. And they made all these plans, including a two-state solution, including ending the war in Gaza, like within a week, et cetera, et cetera. And we related the story. And the only reason we did is because it was picked up by Breitbart and other sources, and everybody seemingly thought it was real. But to me, it sounded rather fishy. But all right, I'll at least report it and we'll see what happens. But what happened was yesterday afternoon, everybody started running with this story and going on and talk about how Trump and Netanyahu have basically betrayed their people. Now, after defeating Iran, they're going to have a two-state solution, give up Israeli territory, force a ceasefire on Gaza, immediately, with Hamas probably still in some type of command and leadership. It was very strange, and so I decided I'm not going to do a second edition of breaking news because it didn't make sense. It's one of those things that just didn't feel right. And there are times when I only will do one because the stories besides that were not very huge, not very big, but also it just seemed something weird as everybody's jumping on this. Well, I'm glad I didn't. Here's the headline today. Number one from the Jewish News Syndicate, Prime Minister's office denies U.S.-Israel talks on two-state solution took place. Israel was not presented with the political proposal supposedly described in the article and obviously did not agree to it. The Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem on Friday flatly denied claims published in Israel Hayom that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had a high-level conversation with President Donald Trump, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer about establishing a Palestinian state. The Prime Minister's office stated the conversation described in the article, Israel Hayom on Thursday, the conversation did not take place. Israel was not presented with the political proposal supposedly described in the article and obviously did not agree to it. The Israel Hayom report, citing anonymous sources, claimed that the four leaders spoke by phone shortly after the American airstrikes on three Iranian nuclear facilities on June 22nd, codename Operation Midnight Hammer. The article described the participants as euphoric over the operation's success, following on from Israel's sustained aerial bombardment of high-value and human infrastructure targets, and claimed that the conversation pivoted to a far-reaching regional strategy. This included an expanded Abraham Accords framework, Gaza war termination within 2 weeks, Arab-led governance in Gaza, and a conditional Israeli endorsement of a future two-state solution. According to the article, the plan also involved exile for Hamas leadership, global resettlement options for Gaza residents, and eventual U.S. recognition of limited Israeli sovereignty in parts of Judea and Samaria. It further alleged that Trump had pressured Netanyahu to conclude military operations in Gaza and grew irate when Israeli airstrikes in Iran continued after his ceasefire announcement. The Prime Minister's office categorically rejected these claims, emphasizing that no such political plan was presented or agreed to by Israel. The denial follows growing speculation in Israeli media over behind the scenes coordination between Jerusalem and Washington following the U.S. airstrikes on Iran. However, officials in both capitals have remained tight lipped about diplomatic discussions related to Gaza and broader peace efforts. On Thursday night, Netanyahu reiterated in a post on X, formerly Twitter, that Israelis' actions against Iran created an opportunity for dramatic expansion of the peace agreements, with particular reference to expanding the Abraham Accord. Now, again, while we reported the story yesterday from Hamas, from Hayom, we thought it sounded really strange, rather fishy. Like we said, Hayom is a conservative site, usually supportive of the Netanyahu government. However, it seems the entire story ended up being fake news. Sadly, the story about the end of the Gaza war within a week continues to be cited today, this morning, in various sources, but is clearly fake news. So, in the days ahead, here's what we've learned from this. We expect to see more stories like this as the situation in the Middle East is rapidly changing. We know that. While nothing surprises us any longer, we need to be careful with the latest rumors. And it seems all these points that were made, picked up by these really good sources and promoting it as something that really happened, just an untrue, fake news. So, again, must be real careful about what we say here and what we promote. All right, headline number two. Now, this we know for sure. Israel Katz, the defense minister of Israel, directed the Israeli Defense Force to develop a plan to stymie Iranian recovery. This is from the Jewish News Syndicate. IDF Chief Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir said the damage inflicted on the Islamic Republic will help advance Israel's war objectives against Hamas. Defense Minister Katz said on Friday he directed the IDF to formulate an enforcement plan against Iran, including steps to preserve Israel's aerial superiority, prevent the advancement of Tehran's nuclear and missile programs, and respond to the Islamic Republic's support for terrorism. We will act regularly to thwart the threats of this nature, he said. I suggest the defanged head of the snake in Tehran understand and beware. Operation Rising Lion was only the preview of a new Israeli policy, he continued. After October 7th, immunity is over. Katz also said the 12-day war would go down as a remarkable chapter in Israel's history and in the annals of global conflict. He highlighted that Israel had opened the skies over Tehran, targeting and neutralizing Iranian air defense systems, destroying nuclear infrastructure and missile production facilities, and severely damaging missile launchers. Additionally, Israel killed many key Iranian security figures and leading scientists, effectively dismantling the decades-long plan by the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei to annihilate the Jewish state. As we did mention yesterday in another story, it was, 5 decades long, basically, almost. 1979 is when it started with the Iranian Revolution there. They ousted the Shah and Ayatollah Khomeini took over. They've spent over $1 trillion in the last almost 50 years building this infrastructure to destroy Israel, to destroy the United States, the nuclear ambition, and all of it's been for naught. All of it has been basically destroyed. So anyway, the comments came again after a public statement. We also mentioned a rare one from the leader of the David Barnea, Mossad. It's kind of like their secret service, as it were, who were more like MI5 and that CIA, I guess. The Mossad director who announced Wednesday that the spy agency would continue to conduct covert operations inside Iran for the foreseeable future. We will be there, as we have been. We've worked for months and years to carry out the necessary actions and reach the right moment. So they have. They've been doing this for years and years. So much has been going on over the years in Iran. There have been people embedded there for decades, for such a time as this 12-day war. So anyway, the bottom line is Israel's not taking any chances in the future. They're right on it. We talked about yesterday in Lebanon. They saw Hezbollah trying to rebuild one of their offensive positions. They destroyed it with 12 rockets. And so they said, we're not going to let this go any further. If Iran does anything, again, we will hit them right away. And so it's really interesting how Israel is finally doing what they should be doing, should have been doing. You know, their hands were tied behind their back during the Biden administration, but now it seems like they're at where they should be. Now, headline number three shows us the reason why this is necessary. With chants of death to America, death to Israel, Iran holds state funeral for leaders slain in war. Iranian President and Quds Force commander attend ceremony in Tehran for 60 people killed in Israeli attacks, while Khamenei apparently stays away. Thousands of mourners lined the streets of downtown Tehran on Saturday for the funeral of the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and other top commanders and nuclear scientists killed during a 12-day war with Israel. The ceremony to honor the martyrs has officially started, state TV said, showing footage of people donning black clothes, waving Iranian flags, and holding pictures of the slain military commanders. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, as well as other senior government officials, attended the event. Images show coffins draped in Iranian flags and bearing portraits of the deceased commanders in uniform near Halab Square in central Tehran. The caskets of Guards Chief General Hossein Salami, the head of the Guards Ballistic Missile Program General Amir Ali Hajijadeh, and others were driven on trucks along the capital's Azadi Street as people shouted, now get this, death to America and death to Israel. And the flags of both countries were burned. And we know we've reported Salami and Hajizadeh were killed the first day of the war when Israel launched the sweeping assault on Iran's top military leaders, their nuclear scientists, the uranium enrichment sites, etc., and to prevent the Islamic Republic from destroying the Jewish state. Now, also, what's really interesting about this state funeral, there was no immediate sign of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in the state broadcast of the funeral. Khamenei, who has not made a public in-person appearance since the outbreak of the war, has held prayers for fallen commanders over their caskets before the open ceremonies at previous funerals, later aired on state television. He is conspicuous by his absence. We had a couple of stories yesterday we didn't get to do about where is Khamenei, how come we haven't seen anything about him, what's going on, because all kinds of rumors taking place. Anyway, and we find the same old coming from Iran. Here's the bottom line. Nothing seems to have changed. The rumors abound about people rising up en masse and a regime change taking place, etc. None of this seems to be true. All right, until there's evidence to the contrary, we will assume Iran plans to rebuild and continue their goal of the destruction of the United States of America as well as Israel. The earlier response from the supreme leader, of course, about his take on the war did not impress President Trump, as our fourth and last headline indicates. Trump says he weighed lifting sanctions on Iran. He blocked as an Israeli final knockout of the regime. This is from the Jewish News Syndicate. He said, I knew exactly where he was sheltered and would not let Israel or the U.S. armed forces, by far the greatest, most powerful in the world, terminate his life, the U.S. president said to Khamenei. U.S. President Donald Trump wondered aloud on Friday why Ali Khamenei, the so-called supreme leader of the war-torn country of Iran, would say so blatantly and foolishly that the Islamic Republic defeated Israel in the war. He knows his statement is a lie. As a man of great faith, he is not supposed to lie. His country was decimated, and his three evil nuclear sites were obliterated. I knew exactly where he was sheltered and would not let Israel or the U.S. armed forces, by far the greatest, most powerful in the world, terminate his life. Writing at times in all capital letters, the president said he saved the Iranian regime leader from a very ugly, ignominious death, and that Khamenei does not have to thank him. In fact, in the final act of war, I demanded that Israel bring back a very large group of planes which were heading directly to Tehran, looking for a big day, perhaps the final knockout. Tremendous damage would have ensued and many Iranians would have been killed. It was going to be the biggest attack of the war by far. He also stated he'd been working on the possible removal of sanctions on Iran over the past few days and other things which would give him a much better chance for Iran at a full, fast, and complete recovery. The sanctions are biting, he said, but no. Instead, I get hit with a statement of anger, hatred, and disgust, and immediately I dropped all work on sanction relief and more. Okay, no sanctions relief for Iran. Iran has to get back into the world order flow or things will only get worse for them. They're always so angry, hostile, and unhappy. And look at what it has gotten them. A burned out, blown up blown up country with no future, a decimated military, a horrible economy, and death all around him. They have no hope, and it will only get worse, he added. I wish the leadership of Iran would realize that you often get more with honey than you do with vinegar. Per the White House pool report, Trump was asked on Friday if he continues considering bombing Iran's nuclear facilities if Tehran was enriching uranium to a level that concerned the U.S. And Trump said, sure, without question. He said, absolutely. So, to sum up, here's what's going on. It's clear Iran has no intention of cooperating with the West after its defeat. We saw the story yesterday that they've voted that the IAEA, the Atomic Energy Association, basically cannot go back and look at their sites. They're banned from the country. They're kind of isolating themselves from the world, and they're talking about, going in double time and enriching uranium and building a bomb. Not well, they say not building a bomb, but also continuing on with their nuclear program. But no intention of cooperating with the West. To the contrary, they emphasize how they'll continue their struggle to reach their goals of Israel's destruction as well as that of the U.S. Okay, these hollow words are not fooling anyone. They've been humiliated. The entire world knows it. So we'll keep you posted on what exactly is happening next time in Iran, Gaza, etc., and try and get through all this fake news that's going on right now that is muddling, everything and dirtying the waters and making things very difficult to understand what's really going on. All right. Anyway, what we do know, and here's the great news. We do know from the Bible what's eventually going to happen. We talk about this all the time here on Breaking News. This is the reason we exist. That God has told us Jesus Christ will return. And there's about 50 events that were predicted to take place, as we've talked about, to occur before God's program is finished with time and eternity. One of the books we've written is called Look Up, a Timeline of 50 Last Days Events, and none of them have occurred, have taken place yet. So there's still a lot of things to happen, culminating in the return of Christ, God's kingdom coming to earth, and then eternity with the living God. Again, all of this is free in our book, Look Up, a Timeline of 50 Last Days Events, from our website, Educating Our World, free download under the heading of Bible Prophecy. As is our book, 25 Signs We're Near the End, and many others on the subject. So we encourage you to know what's going on, to understand from Scripture, because that's the most important thing, first and foremost, what's happening. And then we'll see how everything else fits. And right now, as we said, it's fitting magnificently what Scripture said would take place at the time of the end. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. And yes, we will come back to you later today with a second edition of Breaking News and give you the latest stories. Until then, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.